What is up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News and presented by Sticks.com. My name is Emma Lingan. I am your host. I am joined today by Stephen Kerr and Michael Augello, both of the Hockey News as well. Thank you guys for joining us today. We are talking about all things free agency, trades, all kinds of off-season things, because it's been a pretty busy week here in the hockey world. So we've still got lots to talk about today. Before we do get into any of the latest bite-sized storylines from around the NHL, though, do want to let you know that we are brought to you by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on sticks when you can get pro-level composite sticks at Sticks.com? That's Stix.com. Head over there now and gear up without the markup. All right, guys. Just a few things may have happened this week. I don't know. I mean, this just kind of a pretty slow week in the hockey world, right? We don't need to rehash every single trade and free agent signing that has occurred in the last week because we only have 30 minutes here. So do want to dive into some specific topics. Want to start with an interesting one here. Let's go to Chicago. The Blackhawks are reportedly talking with Connor Bedard about his next contract extension. So to review, Bedard has, of course, led the Blackhawks in points each of his first two seasons in the league. He had 67 points this past season, 61 points the season before, which, of course, he missed some time due to injury as well. He also won the Calder Trophy, of course, his first year in the NHL. So, Mike, I'll ask you first. Now that we know that these talks are ongoing, what do you think is an AAV and a term that is reasonable for Chicago and Bedard to settle on, especially considering, the cap going up here?
Yeah, that's going to be a big consideration because we saw with some of the players that were coming off their ELC, most notably J.J. Peterka of the Buffalo Sabres and Matthew Knies of the Toronto Maple Leafs. There was a battle with their particular teams on the length of the contract. And in the case of Peterka, it ended up getting him shipped off to Utah because I think the Sabres only wanted to sign him to a bridge deal, whereas Matthew Knies signed a 6-year deal. I think that battle is going to go on between Kyle Davidson and the representatives for Connor Bedard. Now, he's a former first overall pick and a Calder Trophy winner, so he's at a higher level. I am sure the Blackhawks want to get him locked up for 8 years. I am sure that the agent is saying, maybe not. So in the end, I think they'll probably compromise on contract length. I mean, he's 19 years old. So if they go 5 or 6 years, it would make him an unrestricted free agent at 25. I think the Blackhawks could live with 6 years, but they're going to want 8. And the AAV, I'm sorry, I would say $10 to $11 million a year.
Yeah, that's kind of my range.
Yeah, I was going to ask Stephen, what do you think? Because again, we're seeing this a lot around the league with GMs trying to go for the longer term, but then the agents pushing back and wanting the shorter term with the higher AAV, knowing that the cap is going up. So Stephen, sounds like you're in agreement there.
Yeah, I am. And, Kyle Davidson did point this out when he met with the media that, with the new CBA taking effect in 2026-27, and he of course talks around the salary cap thing by saying, the cap is going to be going up, so kind of hard to arrive at a figure right now. But yeah, I was thinking 9 to 11, the AAV. I think Bedard he's made it clear, he's saying all the right things. Yeah, he wants to be here long term, that sort of thing. And he's entering the last year of his entry-level contract. But I don't think it's something, I don't think you can expect a deal to get done tomorrow, even next week. This is going to go on for a while. And I just, for me, the most interesting question, especially if I'm Connor Bedard, is, so who are you going to surround me with that's going to get us back in the playoffs? They've got some young guys like Nazar, Oliver Moore, Sam, Rinzel, and I always forget. Leshinov. Yeah, that's it. But, and trading for Sam Lafferty. But, they've got to start making some big splashes pretty soon, I think, if they're really going to make a difference and get Bedard into the playoffs. So that would be my biggest thing if I'm Connor Bedard is, where are you going to go moving forward and getting some players around me that's going to get us there?
Yeah, that's a very valid question and definitely one that Bedard and his camp should be asking. Speaking of playoff contending teams, let's go to Dallas. The Stars announced Glen Gulatzan as their new head coach, of course, after firing Pete DeBoer after the end of the season. Gulatzan's first head coaching job was with the Stars from 2011 to 2013. He was actually fired after 2 seasons when Jim Nill took over as the GM in the 2013 offseason. So his most recent head coaching job was in Calgary back in 2017-18. He's since been an assistant on the Edmonton Oilers staff for the last 6 seasons. So maybe a little bit of an off the wall hire here. Mike, what do you think of this move? Do you think this was a good move for the Stars?
Well, it's an interesting move. I mean, I had heard that they were talking to the Texas Stars coach. They had talked to assistant coach Elaine Nezardine. Gulatzan's name came up late in the search. I mean, definitely has head coaching experience, but it's very weird for a head coach to return to the same place that he was a head coach previously. But he's well liked, especially in Edmonton. There was a lot of speculation that Corey Perry might go to Dallas because Gulatzan was going to Dallas. That's how well liked he was as an assistant coach. It's definitely a move where Peter DeBoer was one type of head coach and obviously sort of ostracized him with the group there, especially after the comments with Jake Ottinger. So, Gulatzan's a more team-friendly coach. So I think that's the reason they went with him.
Yeah, well, kind of piggybacking on that, this would make a great headline if I were writing a Dallas Star story. If you can't beat them, hire them. I mean, they go to the Edmonton Oilers, whom they've lost to 2 straight seasons in the Western Conference Finals. You're not going to get Chris Knobloch, obviously. But, hey, if you can get Glen Gulatzan, who had their power play so high, I guess, that's Jim Nill. I mean, I trust Jim Nill in the decisions he makes, but this is a bit of a head scratcher. And I don't know if, this is going to give the Stars the Stanley Cup that has been eluding them the last few years. But, obviously Jim Nill sees something that a lot of Stars fans don't. I mean, there's a lot of upset Stars fans. And the thing about Neil Graham, what it did for him, being the head coach of the Texas Stars, by them promoting him to an assistant under Gulatzan, it keeps him in the organization. And let's say Gulatzan doesn't work out and he gets fired again from Dallas. It's not a stretch to say that Neil Graham could be next in line and being an assistant.
Yeah, I have also heard that that Neil Graham was in conversations as well, and very well could be. This could be a sort of hire where maybe if the season starts, things aren't going well. Goodbye Gulatzan, and you've got your next man up right there in Texas. So could be a fluid situation, but we'll see how this works out for Dallas. All right, one last storyline in the Central Division before we shift over to the Pacific. The Colorado Avalanche have signed Brent Burns, 40-year-old Brent Burns, to a 1-year contract. He just finished an 8-year, $64 million contract that he signed with San Jose back in 2016. Of course, he was then traded to the Carolina Hurricanes, where he has been most recently. Still, despite being 40 years old, Burns has averaged almost 21 minutes of ice time last season. He's also the current active consecutive games played leader at 925. So he's your Iron Man. I mean, he's still durable enough to play even at 40 years old. So again, knowing that the market for really any free agents, but particularly right shot defensemen, was especially thin this year. Mike, do you think that this was a smart signing for the Avs?
It's a home run signing because it doesn't cost them much. I mean, I looked at Burns on July 1st and thought he's going to go to one of these cap-strapped contending teams like Vegas or Florida or Colorado for a chance to win a Stanley Cup. He's never won one. He did get to the Stanley Cup final with San Jose. You know, he's still an effective player. He had 29 points last year, and I don't think he's going to be expected to play the 21 minutes that you were mentioning. He's probably going to be playing on the bottom pairing since they have, you know, Taves and Makar and then Sam Girard and Josh Manson. He's probably going to play bottom pairing. And if you limit his minutes, you know, with his advanced age for a hockey player, I think you're going to get the best out of Brent Burns. It's a home run signing.
Steven, what do you think of this signing? Do you think it'll pan out well for Colorado?
Well, yeah, I think what they're trying to do here is add depth and, you know, experience. He's got that. Durability, as we mentioned, he's got that. I mean, he's played all 82 games, you know, at least in the last 4 seasons. It's not a sexy signing. And, you know, I kind of like to go on social media and see some of the fan reactions. And some of the things I'm looking at are anything but welcoming. But, yeah, I agree with Mike. You know, if he's going to be a bottom line blue liner, for what they're getting for him, I think it is a good signing.
Yeah, again, I think anyone who maybe has sticker shock at the age probably hasn't seen Brent Burns play recently. So definitely, I think will work out well for them. All right, now let's head on over to the Pacific Division. Let's start in Vancouver. So the Canucks lost Pius Suter to the St. Louis Blues in free agency. This was sort of maybe expected after they were able to re-sign Brock Besser to that new contract. Suter signed with the Blues on a 2-year deal with a $4.125 million AAV. So that's a pretty big payday considering he was making just $1.6 million in Vancouver. So he's 29 years old. He recorded career highs in goals, points, match career highs in assists in 81 games last season with the Canucks. Now, that is largely due to the fact that he was playing in a more elevated role for a large part of the season because of injuries and other off-ice issues on the Canucks. And Mike and I have talked at length about that. But do you think that, you know, obviously Suter, I think if there weren't those injuries and other issues last year in Vancouver, he wouldn't have reached the point totals that he did. Do you think, Mike, I'll ask you first, do you think that this was really that big of a loss for the Canucks now that, you know, their center depth consists of Elias Pettersson, Filip Chytil, Rady, and Teddy Bluger? I mean, what do you think?
It's a risk. I think their calculation here is that Chytil will fit in as the number 2 center behind Pettersson, and that they didn't want to spend the money after extending Connor Garland after signing Besser to the 7-year deal. They didn't, not to say it was wasted money, but they just, he's not a third line center. He is somebody who fits into a top 6 role. And if they think Chytil is their second line center, then it makes sense. I mean, the center market and the prices of centers on July 1st, whether it be restricted free agents or unrestricted free agents, was obviously elevated. And that was because there weren't too many of them. I mean, after Matt Duchene signed in Dallas and John Tavares re-signed in Toronto, there was a dearth of centers. So Suter took advantage of that.
Steven, what do you think of this? I mean, do you think it's going to be that big of a loss for the Canucks? Especially, you know, now there's maybe a little bit of question of why would you pay Evander Kane $5 million and you couldn't pay Pius Suter $4 million? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that was my question. I mean, this is a bit of a head scratcher for me. I think, you know, Kane had 12 points in 21 playoff games, yes, with Edmonton, but you know, you're watching him play in the playoffs and some of the ridiculous penalties that hurt the Oilers. You know, would that have mattered could they have beaten Florida anyway? No, probably not. But, as you mentioned, you've got a center that has had career highs in goals and points. I think St. Louis is going to be getting a good player if he can stay healthy. But, yeah, why are you paying Kane this kind of money, a winger, and just the fact that, the Vancouver locker room, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, what it's going to be like this coming season, just after the fiascos that had this past year. Adding somebody like Kane, I mean, he's a bit controversial in his own right. He'll certainly add some physicality to the Canucks, but yeah, for paying him the kind of money they were, I just didn't understand it.
Yeah, Mike, we might be back for round 2 of As the Canucks Turn, this time with Evander Kane as the protagonist instead of JT Miller. Plus, you mentioned Kane and his contributions in the playoffs, which are, valid and worth mentioning, but you got to get to the playoffs for that to matter. And Vancouver did not do that last year. So we will
right.
we will see what
and
happens.
Especially with Kane didn't even play in the regular season because of his own health. That's a question.
That's right. All right. So let's take a little break from NHL, free agency and whatnot here. I have an interesting question here. Mike, I'm going to start with you. Do you think, I just want your immediate reaction because I'm not prepping you for this. Do you think Don Cherry deserves to be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame next year?
Absolutely, positively, he does. The question is what category. You could make a case for him being a Hall of Fame caliber coach. He was a coach of the year. He got the Boston. He had an excellent record with the Bruins, not so much with the Colorado Rockies before he went into broadcasting. If you're going to induct him as a broadcaster, it could either be I think he would fit in as a builder. And, I don't want to talk. I don't think that how his career ended at Hockey Night in Canada is a factor here. He sort of revolutionized, color commentating at first, and then in between periods, having the analysis and his colorful suits and everything else. I mean, you see ESPN, you see TNT with their basketball coverage and with hockey mimicking Cherry. They have panels because I don't think they can find one person who has that big of a personality, but that is that was the blueprint. So I think, yes, Don Cherry should be in the Hall of Fame.
All right. We got Mike's answer. Steven, what about you? What do you think? Yes or no?
Well, I think he does, but I think there were two problems here. First of all, I kind of disagree with Mike on the controversial aspect. I mean, no matter how he meant some of the comments he's made, over the last few years with, it does rub some voters the wrong way. People like that can do that. I think it can come back to bite him. And of course there are some naysayers that, well, yeah, he led Boston to the Stanley Cup Finals, but he didn't win a cup. Now, from the broadcasting side, the Foster Hewitt Award is what they give for that. It mostly goes to play-by-play and color analyst roles. So, that would be something that would have to change. He would have to go in just, as a different sort there. Somebody, he would break the mold in that regard, I think. I think he deserves it, but I just think, with some players, and that's not saying that all players or anybody in the Hall of Fame should be nice guys,
right?
Or just, have clear-cut records where they're not controversial. That's not it. But I do think to some degree that has hurt and will hurt Cherry in him trying to get in. Hey, if you ask Bobby Orr, if Bobby Orr was the only vote, he would be in a long, long time ago, because Orr has certainly been we're trying to recruit and getting him to the Hall of Fame for years.
Well, let's just say this. The Hall of Fame in all sports are not filled with saints.
No,
so
they're not.
The transgressions of Don Cherry as opposed to as opposed to O.J. Simpson in football and a number of others in other halls of fame. I don't think that should be a factor. Is it a factor? Sure. But I think eventually he will get in the Hall of Fame.
All right. Well, good, spirited, lively debate to break up the free agent and trade talk here. But now let's get right back into it. Let's head over to LA. So first free agency, first offseason under Ken Holland as their new GM. And this is a team that I know, Mike, you and I have talked about before that, they've been just really needing to make that big move, that, that next big thing just to kind of get them over the hump here. I don't know. What do you think? So Ken Holland, he's now in his first day of free agency, very busy. He signed Corey Perry for 1 year, Joel Armia for 2 years, Brian Dumoulin for 3 years, Cody Ceci for 4 years, Anton Forsberg for 2 years. I mean, I can't recall Rob Blake, at least in recent years, being that busy with I would say impact additions. Like they're depth players, but they're impact depth players. Mm-hmm. How do you evaluate the start of the Ken Holland era in LA?
Well, some of the signings were curious. The Cody Ceci signing, I've never been a big Cody Ceci fan. If you ask Edmonton Oilers fans the way he played when they made the run to the Stanley Cup final, they said they got there in spite of Cody Ceci instead of because of him. Giving him 4 years at $4.5 million, I think is questionable. The Dumoulin deal, I mean, he's been a decent defenseman with Pittsburgh and Seattle. Joel Armia is a good defensive forward and a penalty killer. Forsberg, I've never been an Anton Forsberg fan. Corey Perry on a 1 year deal, have no problem with that. I think that one is pointed directly toward Edmonton. If Corey Perry takes out Connor McDavid, like he's taken out other players that Edmonton has faced, and I'm not saying he's going to cheap shot him, but I just think that was, at least they only gave him 1 year and it was a bonus laden deal. And on top of that, they signed Andrei Kuzmenko on a 1 year deal. They needed to add scoring, and all that group did is improve the depth. But where are they getting the scoring that they have lacked, that we have talked about ad nauseum?
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. I mean, Corey Perry, I think, is a good add if you're, looking to add some experience if you can get to the playoffs. And he certainly provided that. He kind of seemed to find a little fountain of youth there in the postseason. But, you've got to get there first. I mean, the rest of them, I mean, he was aggressive, but I'm not sure that he was necessarily successful in really upgrading the Kings when you're talking about, guys like Armia and Dumoulin. Ceci, definitely. How is it that Cody Ceci can continue to get big money from multiple teams? I mean, that's the question I keep asking. I watched him with the Stars this past year. Since I live in Texas, I do watch a lot of Stars game, and he really did nothing for the Stars, and that's kind of been his MO everywhere else. So, yeah, it's just some curious signings. I don't know that he really upgraded the team, but again, on paper, doesn't always add up. So maybe they're just hoping they can get some fountain of youth with some of these guys like Perry, and just perhaps grind their way into the playoffs. But I don't see it.
And Steven, I'll give you a quick answer on Ceci. It's because he's right-handed, and I mean, I'm sure Emma Nashville probably would have been in on Cody Ceci, but wait a second, he's right-handed, so we can't do that.
Yeah, no, Nashville just likes to stockpile left shot defensemen for days. If you need a left shot defenseman, they've got like 17 of them. So I think you're good there. But yeah, it's interesting with Cody Ceci. Kind of seems like he always tends to be in the right place at the right time, I think, when it comes to maximizing his market and getting the big money and getting the big roles. I mean, I think he's a perfectly fine defenseman. But kind of got a bigger role in Dallas in the short time he was there, just because of the injuries they had on their blue line. So interesting. We'll see how this pans out for LA. Quickly, let's go over to Calgary. The Flames re-signed Morgan Frost to a 2-year contract extension. He's got a 4.37 million AAV. So, of course, he was traded to Calgary earlier in the season with Joel Farabee from the Flyers. So Frost had 37 points in the season, but only when he was with Calgary, he only had 3 goals and 12 points in 32 games played. So, Mike, clearly they see something in him. Do you think this is just centers are slim pickings, and so we have to sign someone, or do you think they really see something in Morgan Frost here?
I think they see something in Morgan Frost. I think, in Philadelphia under Tortorella, he did score 40-plus points twice. That's a feat because Tortorella, I don't think really liked Morgan Frost and the type of player he was. He's a playmaking center. He got a lot of skill. He tried to make him into more of a two-way forward. I think he'll grow in Calgary, and he'll probably be second-line center behind Nazem Kadri. If he gets Huberdeau as a line mate, but there are some young, talented wingers on the Flames. I think Morgan Frost is going to end up being probably a 55 to 60 point center. So I think it's a good signing for the Flames.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been, to me, it's kind of a bit of an overpay, unless you feel like, he just needed time to kind of get into the Calgary system, that he could have a much better season than, what he showed after being traded to the Flames. Now, the interesting thing to me, the Flames have about $15.4 million in cap space still available. You still have Connor Zary to consider in re-signing him. But, yeah, I just thought it was a little bit of an overpay, like they said, you're just hoping that they see something in him that he will start scoring again like he is expected to.
All right. Well, now I have an interesting question, kind of a broad question here. What direction are the Seattle Kraken trying to go in? That's what I would like to know, because if we look at their signings so far this offseason, so of course they sign Matt Murray for goaltending depth. They lose Andre Burakovsky to Chicago, but they bring in Mason Marchment from Dallas. They lost Brandon Tanev to Utah, well, by way of Winnipeg for a brief moment last year. And then they brought in Ryan Lindgren from the Rangers by way of Colorado. So do you think, Mike, what are the Kraken trying to do here? Are they trying to do this little retool on the fly situation, maybe that Washington did, or are they just kind of treading water right now?
The moves of the Kraken have been head scratching. Jason Botterill, the former Sabres GM, is doing as good a job in Seattle so far as he did in Buffalo. They have some young talent that I think they want to give opportunity to, the Shane Wright and Matty Beniers. So I think they want to put a support structure around them. They had signed Chandler Stevenson to that long deal. The moves this year, Matt Murray, love him, but he can't stay healthy. But I think he's the number 3 behind Grubauer and Decord. And pretty much it was move in, move out. Burakovsky had, I think, burned his bridges in Seattle. And I think Mason Marchment was actually a good acquisition. It's only a 1-year situation. But are they moving the ball in terms of being a playoff team in the Western Conference? No, I think they're sort of just hovering there, and I think they'll be in contention, but I don't think that they've really made any kind of moves. Unless their young kids grow and have great years, I don't think they're making any progress towards being a playoff team.
Yeah, I think they're gambling. Just, when you're talking about the Murray signing, he's coming off an injury, and they're obviously going for depth. When you're talking about Lindgren, Mason Marchment, his production in Dallas just seemed to decline a bit. And, he'll provide a physical presence. But I think, I don't think this is enough to overcome losing players like Brandon Tanev, for instance. So, yeah, I think a lot of the moves they made were more depth moves, but they certainly weren't huge splashes. And I don't know how it's going to move the needle for them going forward.
Yeah, been trying to wrap my head around this one, trying to figure out what exactly they're trying to do. So wanted to get your takes on that. All right, let's head back to the Oilers here. They lost several players in free agency, including Corey Perry, who we talked about earlier with the Kings. But Now they have signed Andrew Mangiapane. So he signed a 2-year deal in Edmonton, 3.6 million AAV. So last season, of course, with the Washington Capitals, he had 14 goals, 28 points in 81 games played. To me, obviously, you're not adding a ton of offense there. That's really no surprise, but I think you're adding in that grit factor that maybe you lost by losing Corey Perry. So, of course, Mangiapane is a bit of a conundrum, though, because his numbers last year were a significant drop off from where he was the year before. He had 40 points in 75 games the year before, and he had previously scored 35 goals in Calgary back in the 21-22 season. So he's got that offensive upside. We just haven't really seen it this past year, but he's also got that sandpaper aspect to him as well. With that in mind, Mike, do you think that the Oilers see Mangiapane maybe rediscovering that offensive touch as a member of their top six, or is he just kind of going to be a bottom six grinder for them?
No, I think they slot him in as a top six. I think this is sort of Jeff Skinner 2.0. This is what they thought they were getting with Jeff Skinner last year. You know, somebody who, and he's only 29. Skinner was, I think, 32 when they signed him to the 1-year deal. But they were hoping he fit in the top six as a winger for either McDavid or Draisaitl. I sort of see Mangiapane as a replacement for Connor Brown, who they lost to New Jersey. Yeah. Connor Brown could play higher in the lineup, but sort of settled into that third line. And, you know, Mangiapane has that grit, but I also think Edmonton is hoping they get that 35-goal Mangiapane and not the 17 or 14-goal guy that played in Calgary or in Washington.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a gamble, especially if they're looking at him to be a top six. And, you know, sometimes a change of scenery can do things for a player. You know, maybe he can get some of that goal scoring back. But, you know, losing players like Connor Brown, yeah, maybe he can fit in that role. But, you know, Edmonton is kind of an interesting story because they did re-sign Bouchard. They re-signed center Trent Frederick. Those were pretty big. But, you know, I'm not sure if Mangiapane and some of the other moves they made are going to necessarily get them back to the Stanley Cup Finals. You know, but you're gambling on a lot as far as Mangiapane, in my opinion, being a top six.
And let's just say this, Stephen, if Connor McDavid had said to them, show me what you're going to do to keep me in Edmonton. What Stan Bowman has showed them, he's booking tickets out of Edmonton.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, very interesting to see how this plays out over the next year with with McDavid and his contract situation as well. Will be interesting to keep an eye on the Oilers. Wrapping up our Pacific Division discussion, let's talk about the San Jose Sharks. Obviously in a rebuild right now, but they've been pretty busy with some signings. Goodness knows they've got plenty of cap space to do it. So they have signed Alex Nedeljkovic, or they traded for Alex Nedeljkovic from Pittsburgh to get sort of a 1B partner for Yaroslav Askarov, who I guess they have decided is ready to be a 1A in the NHL. Not sure about that yet, but they are banking on it, and they have the luxury of being in a rebuild, so they can do that right now. But they also went and signed Dmitry Orlov for 2 years, 6.5 million AAV. And they recently as well picked up Nick Leddy off of waivers. So that was essentially to get them to the salary cap floor, which again, that's how much cap space they had. What do you think, Mike, of these signings? And you know, what do you expect to see from San Jose this year as they continue in this rebuild?
Well, I saw Mike Grier at the end of the season in Buffalo. I should have told him, I have my skates in my closet. Would you sign me for $2 million a year just to get to the cap floor? Now, you know, I think Orlov is still a very good defenseman. Leddy is 34. You know, that was clearly a claim to get to the cap floor, as you mentioned. They signed John Klingberg for a 1-year deal for $4 million. And I think we saw, you know, I give him a lot of credit coming back from his hip injury, and he played pretty well at times in the playoffs. But at the end, he was, I think, debilitated by Florida banging him around. So I don't know how much is left there. I mean, they made a lot of moves very similar to Chicago a couple years ago when they brought in Foligno and they re-signed Jason Dickinson. They made a lot of moves just to get to the cap. I would hope that they're surrounding their young core players like Smith and Celebrini with good people, because they're not going to make the playoffs, but you have to make progress, and you have to add veterans and surround them and protect them. So I think that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I think the Sharks are going to be an interesting team to watch. I'm not sure, that they're necessarily playoff bound, but in the signing of Orlov, a 2-year contract, a $6.5 million cap hit. He's a veteran presence, as Mike was mentioning, giving some of that to the young guys. He can eat up a lot of ice time. He had 28 points in 76 games, and then he had 4 assists in the postseason for Carolina. So, he's at least 20 points in 10 straight seasons. So, he can score, and he does add some veteran presence and some durability. But, yeah, as far as the 2 goaltenders, I mean, I don't know that you're necessarily got a grade A in either one of them. But I think, the Sharks are trying to make some progress. I think they will at the very least be more entertaining to watch than they have in past seasons.
All right. Well, a fun little treat for everyone. Going to wrap up today's episode with some live breaking news. The largest fish remaining, arguably, on the free agent market, Nikolaj Ehlers, has signed with the Carolina Hurricanes 6 years at $8.5 million AAV. Obviously, this upgrades their left wing in Carolina. They needed to add some scoring, weren't really able to do that, especially with the players they've lost over the last 2 years. I mean, guys like Gensel and Necas and Rantanen and Taylor Hall as well now, no longer being their second line left wing. So just a quick recap here of Ehlers' last season in Winnipeg. He had 63 points in 69 games. He's 29 years old, so this contract will take him until he is 35. So, Mike, initial, we are just finding this out in real time. So, initial reactions to the signing. What do you think of the fit here in Carolina for Nick Ehlers?
Well, I think the fit, they actually caught somebody who wanted to be in Carolina. I mean, remember, they traded for Gensel. They couldn't sign him. He went to Tampa. They traded for Rantanen. He went to Dallas. This guy signed with them. So he clearly wants to be in Carolina, and I'm sure he got some intelligence from his countryman, Freddie Anderson. So, the Danish Olympic team and the Finnish Olympic team are sort of commingled on the Carolina Hurricanes. I don't think the price is bad, $8.5 million. I think the one thing with Ehlers that's been chronicled for a long time is he can't stay healthy. And if he could stay healthy, his price probably would have been $9.5 to $10 million. But he's going to miss games. He has missed games throughout his career. But I think it's a good signing, and Carolina got a guy who wants to be there.
Yeah, I think that this is a big signing for the Hurricanes just for that very reason, because everyone's been waiting with bated breath since Tuesday. Where's Ehlers going to sign? Where's Ehlers going to go? He's going to decide Wednesday. Well, Wednesday came and went. And, of course, he had great timing signing during the wraparound because, we get to jump right on it. But I think this is big for the Canes. I think it will, they just have had such hard luck in getting players to want to stay there. That's why Mikko Rantanen's in Dallas. He didn't want to stay there. And so I think really, as Mike said, if he could just get healthy and stay that way, this will be a big boost for the Canes. Now, I don't know if they're going to go deep in the playoffs just from this, but this will certainly boost them, I think, next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Nick Ehlers is a guy who maybe almost kind of got underutilized or overshadowed a bit in Winnipeg. So I think that this will be a place where he can really provide something on offense for the Carolina Hurricanes. And yes, we love it when news happens while we're recording the show. Very considerate of Eric Tulsky and Nick Ehlers to do that for us.
We just need some sound effects for breaking news, I guess, from here on out, huh?
Yeah, right. We gotta get the graphics team on that too. All right. Well, that seems like a perfect place to end today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you, as always, for joining us today. Thank you to Stix.com for sponsoring us. We will be back with an all-new episode tomorrow. For Mike Augello and Stephen Kerr, I'm Emma Lingan, and we'll see you next time.